Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Scott Ozorowski. I'm with the Study Abroad Office. And Heather, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Professor Heather Easley. I am the person who designed and teaches this class and program.
All right, so we're going to go through and just kind of do like a little 20 to 30 minutes, just sort of talking about the program. If you have questions along the way, please just unmute or throw them into the chat and we'll answer them. But we'll definitely have time at the end for questions and answers as well. So I'm going to just click here. So yes, our program leaders, Heather introduced herself. Katie Schiller is the other person who's going to help lead this program next summer. She works in the advising office for computing and digital media. And so the two of them will be your fearless leaders on this program. And just a quick overview of kind of how the courses work. And then I'm going to have Heather talk about the actual program on the ground in Scotland. So this is a course that gives credit for the Focal Point Seminar. And that is LSP 112, which is a class that's a required class for most first-year students. It's a 4-credit class. And these classes take place in winter and spring quarter for most students. And there's about 100 different focal point seminars that students can choose from, kind of like you choose from a Chicago quarter class in the fall or the Discover and Explorers. And what we have done is we've attached a study abroad component to 6 of these focal point seminars. So we've got a couple that are happening in spring break attached to winter classes, and then 4 that are happening next summer, of which Scotland is one of them, attached to spring classes. You also will be registered in a 2-credit course. This is the study abroad component. So you get 4 credits for the course that you're actually going to be taking in Chicago during the spring quarter, which I'll have Heather talk about. And then you have an additional 2 credits that goes towards the work that goes along with your study abroad program, which is typically reflection papers, participation, other activities or components to that part of the program while you're abroad. Heather, you want to take a quick second and just talk about the actual focal point seminar in Chicago, and then we'll kind of move on to the trip itself?
Right, of course. So to give you a better idea of what a focal point is, because that's a question that has come up in a lot of the study abroad presentations that we've been doing in the Discover and Explore classes, a focal point is a class that looks very closely at one topic, and you approach that topic from at least 3 different disciplines. So for my Scotland class, our class will look at this country from the lens of history, political science, and sociology or culture. And that is, it has a really great flow to it. I love it. We kind of start with early Scotland and work our way up to, as is here on the slide right now, the Jacobite Uprising of 1745. We study the Bonnie Prince Charlie. We sort of understand how this seminal battle that happened, actually the last land battle on British soil, we understand how that impacted the Scots greatly at the time, and actually how it still shapes their nation today. So that's sort of like the history side of it. And then we move into the political science side, where we look much more closely at Scottish politics and politics in the rest of the UK, because of course, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. And so they've got this sort of like Scotland and England, or maybe Scotland versus England thing going on. And the very big political scene that has existed for the past 7 or 8 years is this quest for Scottish independence. So you've got people on both sides, people who want Scotland to become a completely independent nation, no longer part of the UK. And then of course you have people who want to stay in for multitudes of reasons that we'll talk about in the class. And then we move into a much more sociological look at Scotland. We want to know about their culture. What does it mean to be Scottish? What is the relationship between Scots and their land? And land ownership is another focus of our course, because land ownership has this very unique position of being very historical, very political, and of course cultural as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of what our class is about. However, a student who took this class from me, I was talking to them about doing this info session today. They said, please, please tell everybody that Scotland is like the real life Game of Thrones. So, so I promised that I would let you know. There's a whole lot of very interesting sort of political dynastic backstabbing that went on in this country, and it's fascinating to study.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Mhm.
I've got here just sort of the quick travel itinerary and a little map of Scotland. So basically travel-wise, and I'm going to have Heather take it over after here. Right after the last week of classes and commencement weekend, the 14th of June, which I think is a Tuesday, will be the flight to Scotland. And then it's basically going to be a couple of days in Edinburgh, then moving up to Inverness, a little time on the Isle of Skye, looping back down to Fort William, and then a couple of days in Glasgow before the end. So making a real sort of traverse around the country. I'm getting to see a lot of different places along the way. And so anything about the itinerary you want to mention, Heather, or should I just go into the pictures?
You know, I would just mention it might be hard to think of the scale here. I love for students to know that Scotland is the size of Maine. So when we have our big, beautiful coach bus that drives us from one city to another, it feels, in terms of like how long it takes to get from one place to the other, you know, it's never more than a few hours. And then you're in a completely different landscape and a completely different city. So it's actually very fun the way that we do it. And some programs, which has its merits, they stay in one city the whole time that they're there. And this program, we're a little bit more like mover and shaker. We you know, all of these cities that are listed, you get the chance to spend a couple of nights in each one of them and explore all of these different places. So yeah, it's great.
And we're just going to go through a bunch of pictures, and Heather's going to talk you through kind of things that will happen. So
yeah, so this is, I actually think this is one of the first pictures that I took when we were actually on the ground in Scotland. And we had not slept in like 20 hours at this point because we had a connecting flight. Remember, Scott, we had a connecting flight in Iceland. So our travel was much actually longer than it will be for this group because we have direct flights this time. And this is one of my beloved students, Saffron, in this picture. And that is Arthur's Seat behind us, which is this beautiful mountain that is on the backside of Edinburgh. So here is our wonderful group from 2019, which is, of course, the last time any of these programs got to run. And here we are at Scottish Parliament.
What'd you do at Parliament?
So here's the thing. We actually, we meet with a member of Scottish Parliament kind of earlier in the day. And we have all sorts of interesting questions for them. We meet with somebody from the Scottish National Party who's very, very pro-independence. That's the purpose of their party, in fact. And then we actually we do some other things in the city, and we come back and we watch an active session of Parliament. So if you've ever watched videos of a session of you know, the UK Parliament or Scottish Parliament, they bang on the tables when they are upset about something or happy about something. They're very vocal. It is fascinating to watch these things take place. And it's also really fun to see these members of Scottish Parliament talking to each other, sometimes not very nicely. In fact, when we've studied these people during our course, so we watch an active session of Parliament. But this was taken in the morning when nobody was in. Nobody was in the main chamber except for our class. And here's our group again. This is in front of Arthur's Seat. So this was actually close to where we stayed because we stayed at the University of Edinburgh, but our class is staying in a more central location. It'll actually be a little bit less walking, which will kind of be nice for the group. We're staying right on the Royal Mile. And here's another picture of this absolutely stunning chamber at Scottish Parliament. And this is moving on, like after we've moved out of Edinburgh, which we're there for a few days. So we do a lot of things there, but we stopped at the Kelpies, and there's folklore that you'll learn about while we're there, but these are absolutely massive. Like you can't even understand the scale of them from this picture. These absolutely massive steel horses. And this actually was taken in Glasgow. This little promenade that you see all these students walking on is right next to Glasgow Cathedral. There's a picture coming up of Glasgow Cathedral, but we were walking up to the necropolis, which gives a beautiful view of Glasgow. And we get to sort of weave through this very, very old cemetery, and we get a fantastic vantage point for photos. So here is Glasgow Cathedral from the back end. We do a tour of Glasgow Cathedral, and it was everybody is always asking me what my favorite thing that we did, during the study abroad was, and I was actually really surprised that it was this touring Glasgow Cathedral. We had the most amazing guide, and I learned so much, and it's just stunningly gorgeous and so like rich with history, and it's a miracle that it even stands. It's the oldest sort of Catholic origin church in all of the UK. It's the only one that survived this very tumultuous period where they burned down all the churches, but this one survived. So we're really lucky to be able to go there. This is inside of Glasgow Cathedral, and this was our guide, who I'll be requesting again this time, and he's incredible. He knows so much, and I'll say a little bit more about the guides in Glasgow. We have a few people that we work with, and being a tour guide, or sort of like a history guide in Scotland is maybe a little bit different than it is in some other countries. They take it very, very seriously. In order to be a licensed guide and to guide people, you have to be licensed. You actually attend, it's essentially college for a year. And you sort of do a general route in the first half, and then you specialize in the second half. So everybody that we work with while we're on the ground in Scotland is truly an expert on the place, the time period, and they are just brilliant at answering our questions. So every time we would leave one of these guides, it was like our brains would be thrumming with so much information. Oh, and this is heading up into the Highlands. We actually stop at what I think is the best chocolate shop in the world. And this is just a quick snapshot of one of the boxes of chocolates that I bought while we were there. So that's something, if you're a chocolate lover, you're in just for the biggest treat. This is, I smile so much when I see these photos because I love these kids so much. We take a cruise on Loch Ness. So this was part of our group who was sitting outside during our cruise on Loch Ness, and a couple of them got a little bit sunburned while we were out there. But it's so peaceful. It's an incredible way to travel through the Highlands. This is in Inverness, which is this very quaint little city that is near Culloden Moor, and you'll learn a lot more about Culloden in the class. This is the site of that land battle that I was telling you about earlier, this like Jacobites versus Prince William and the Duke of Cumberland, aka the Butcher. And so Inverness is this beautiful little town that's located by Culloden Moor, and this was taken from one of their bridges. And I will point out that this was taken at 10 p.m. So that's the other really amazing thing about the time of year that we go to Scotland. It is still, the sun doesn't set until around 10 p.m. So we have an incredible amount of daylight to work with, and we really take advantage of that. So like if we have a really busy day and then you have the evening to yourself, you really have like a nice chunk of time before it even gets dark outside, which tends to work really nicely for the group. So this is just one, I'm only including one shot from Culloden Moor. It's something that you really have to be there to fully experience it. But this, as you can see on the stone, it talks about all the Highland soldiers that died and were buried at Culloden. So this is our hotel actually in Inverness, and we couldn't resist taking this like very prom-like picture. And I love this hotel. It's such a great like little classic European hotel. And staircase is actually inspired the staircase on the original Titanic. So it's just kind of fun because everywhere we go, we get to learn like these little facts about Scotland and its influence. So this photo is taken at Glenfinnan, and you'll learn a lot more about this place and like why it's so important to the Scots. This is actually like where you see this water and where you see this monument to the Bonnie Prince Charlie. This is where he came aboard, came onto land and raised his standard and said, you know, I am come home, like I'm here to resume my family's rightful place as the monarchs of this great country, which started quite the war, actually. So from this, we are standing on a pretty high hill that we climb, where we can see the Glenfinnan Viaduct on one side. We see this fantastic monument on the other side. And the Glenfinnan Viaduct is that very classic train track that you see in all the Harry Potter films, right? The Jacobite Express, which is also the Hogwarts Express, they travel over the Glenfinnan Viaduct. So people call it the Harry Potter Bridge now, except if you're Scottish, you call it the Glenfinnan Viaduct because that's its actual name. But we ride on the Jacobite Express, and you can see it here. If this looks slightly familiar to you, it's because you've seen it in every Harry Potter film. And this is the last photo that we got as a whole group. This is one of our last nights in Scotland, and we had just gone out for a very fancy dinner together, and we're feeling very sentimental about having to say goodbye to each other at the end of such an incredible experience.
All right, thank you, Heather. I'm going to just do a couple slides on some logistical things, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anybody has. So this is one of the programs where the course is going to happen in spring, and then the travel will happen in mid to late June. So the deadline to apply is February 1st. A lot of people have already been starting their applications, so please don't wait until like the last day of January to do it. Go to the Study Abroad website. You can get the process started now. if you go to the First Year Abroad Scotland program page, there's going to be a little button that says apply now. And then you'll start your application there. There's going to be a short questionnaire that asks you a handful of questions. Why do you want to do the program? How does it relate to your goals here at DePaul? So pretty straightforward stuff. We also require one online recommendation. It can be either a professor from DePaul, or if you don't have someone here at DePaul yet, it could be a high school teacher or a counselor. But oftentimes your Chicago Discover or Explorer professor is happy to do it, or if you have another professor from this fall, they don't have to write you a big detailed recommendation letter. You just put their email address in, they get a little online link that asks them a few questions. So it's pretty straightforward. Once you've done that, your application part is done. Prior to making decisions, there's also going to be a brief interview that you have to do. It's nothing to be worried about. Basically, it's going to be Heather and Katie meeting with small groups of you for like 20 minutes to just chat for a few minutes and get to know everybody. So you'll get emails about that sort of at the end of January, beginning of February to pick a time, and it'll be small groups to just chat a little bit. And then you'll find out well, go ahead, Heather.
I just have a question about that. I can't remember, Scott, because it's been a while. In order to get invited to that interview, they have to have their application completed, not just started.
Yep, you have to have submitted your application.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So basically, you just need to submit your application. And once you do that, when it gets close to the application deadline, Heather and Katie will reach out to start scheduling the times for all the little group interviews. And then you'll find out if you're, I guess, next thing, scholarships. We do have scholarship funding for these programs. There is no separate scholarship application. As long as you apply for the program by February 1st, you'll automatically be considered for the scholarships. We have general study abroad funding and some additional funding for these first year programs to try to help make them as affordable as possible for many people as possible. They range from $1,000 up to almost the full cost of the program. And I'm going to look at cost on the next page. But even those smallest scholarships are about 1/3 of the cost of the program right off the top. And some of them are scholarships for almost the entire cost. In terms of finding out if you've been accepted to the program and if you got scholarship funding, that will happen in mid to late February. So you'll submit everything by February 1st. You'll have your group interview sometime probably in early February. And then in the next couple of weeks, you'll find out if you got accepted or not. And then if you did, how much scholarship funding you got. Our goal is to try to accept as many people as possible. We have a limit of 20 people that can go on each of the programs. Some programs get more applications than others. So there are some moments where there may be a wait list for a program. We don't typically have, 40 or 50 people applying for 20 spots. It may be that there were 30 people or 27 people that applied for 20 spots. Sometimes students that got accepted aren't able to take their spot or didn't get enough scholarship funding. So typically we are able to hopefully let some people from the wait list onto the program to be able to have a spot. But we also typically will have spots available in some of the other programs potentially. So if there's another program that's a backup choice for you, when you do your application, you can list other programs that you might be interested in. And if this program happens to be full, we might say, hey, there are spots available on the Jerusalem program or on the England program, and see how that might work. But our goal is to try to give a spot to as many students as we can on hopefully their first choice program, or if not, then like a second choice program. In terms of the cost of this program is $3,250. And then the tuition for the 6 credit hours. As long as you don't go over 18 credit hours in your spring quarter, you don't have to pay extra tuition. So if you do overload and take more than 18 credits, you have to pay those extra credits just like you would any quarter. But as long as you stay at 18 or less, you don't have extra tuition, and it's just that program fee of $3,250 that you have to pay. The program fee does cover almost everything on the program. It's your airfare, your accommodations. It is about 2/3 of your meals, all your activities, your transportation, pretty inclusive. So the main things it doesn't include are just the handful of meals and snacks that are outside of what's covered for the group, and then other spending money or baggage fees or things like that. So again, those scholarships can cover anywhere from $1,000 to almost the full cost of the program. And that's sort of our general overview. Our study abroad homepage, if you haven't been on there before, there's a first year abroad page, and then the Scotland page has a lot of very, very detailed information. I will click on the page right now to just quickly show it to you if you haven't seen it. When you go to the Scotland page, if you have not started your application, you'll see right here, apply now. That's where you click, and it takes you right into our online application portal. There's detailed information here about the program with a little FYI Broad video. And then there's some information about COVID awareness. We have academic information about the course and how that's going to work. And I'll mention as well, if any of you happen to be an honors student, you will get Honors 102 credit for this program. Or if you have already taken a focal point seminar, there is the potential to get experiential learning credit for it as well. And you would have to just talk to me about it. The travel tab kind of talks through some just information about general travel details. The cost page is what I just showed you about what it includes and doesn't include. And then this past student experience page gives a few tips from former students. And there's a couple students who are happy to have you reach out if you have questions. Yeah. So if you have other questions too, I am the person who's in charge of the whole kind of application process and all of that. So feel free to email me or you can contact Heather if you have questions about the course itself or the kind of trip and activities abroad. But yeah, we'd like to open up to any questions that you have. So unmute yourself, put something in the chat, and we're happy to answer questions in chat some more.
I have one quick question. I don't know if you would know it, but for scholarships, what's like the basis? Like, is it based off of need? Is it based off of like academics?
Yep,
like
great
just
question.
in general?
Yep, I should have mentioned that. It basically looks at financial need and academics. So we're going to be in touch with the financial aid office and we determine financial need based on the FAFSA information that you would have submitted. And so the financial aid office tells us each student what their financial need is. And then we look at your GPA. So it's a combination of those two things. So a student with a strong GPA and high financial need is going to be the student who's most likely to get scholarship funding.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. Other questions? We can't have answered every question. You got to be curious about some other. And if not, that is okay. Excellent. Well, I think some of you have already started an application, so that is awesome. For those of you who haven't, please feel free to get started on that as soon as you can. You don't have to do it all at once. You can start it, you can save as you go along and just kind of play around and write some stuff and come back to it later. But again, any questions you have about the application process or requirements, please contact me. And if you've got questions about the program itself, contact Heather. It's an amazing trip. We're really excited. It's been really hard having to have it canceled for the past couple of years, but we're really excited that we're back to the point where our programs are starting to move forward. And hopefully by next June, we're going to be in an even better place than we are now with COVID. But we're really, really excited about being able to, you know, in 2020, we were all ready to go. We had students accepted and we had to say, you know, we got to cancel it. So we're really hopeful to move forward this year. Heather, you're muted.
I muted myself. You know what?
Oh, gotcha.
But hold on for 1 second.
Yes.
There's literally somebody to pick up a cake at my front door. I'm coming right back because people may have thought of questions. I'll be back in 1 second.
Sounds good. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yes, Erica, could your DePaul advisor write the recommendation letter? Ideally, we would like it to be from a faculty member because it is an academic recommendation and that's who's going to know you the best. So that would be ideal. If it's a situation where you really do not have a faculty member that you feel comfortable with, that's why we allow you as well that you could reach out to a high school teacher or a high school counselor to do it. You know, if all of those things you're not able to, then an advisor potentially could, but we prefer it that it's a faculty member here at DePaul or else a high school teacher or counselor. Thanks, Erica.
You were just answering that question that's in the chat, right, Scott? Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, Heather and I'll stick around for a minute if anyone had any personal kind of one-on-one questions, but otherwise, thank you so much. We look forward to getting your application and hearing more from you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.